Welcome back to Chris and Retro. Um, Today's video is somewhat of a departure from my normal content, just because I was humored a little bit by something. I'm going to react to a channel that I actually watch a lot of. I watch Mandoo. They do Louisiana parole board hearings, and they're entertaining. Just to, sometimes they challenge, what would I do in that situation in terms of as somebody are they actually rehabilitated, that type of thing. And to me, I find it interesting to say the least. But yesterday they posted a video that caught my attention, and I think it does illustrate some things that I've been saying on the show here around your high risk living. And I think a character revealed himself on here that I'm definitely going to call out, right now on the channel, because I think that it's a great illustration of this arrogance that leads to a fall. And the way that we talk to ourselves and the way that we describe ourselves in our own mind, we somehow think that we're better than other people. And so on this parole board case, there was a gentleman that had served, they had determined 41 years, because initially it said 40 years, but I guess actual time was about 41 years. He was there, murder. I'm not sure the exact extent of his charges. I honestly, it's not as important for the video, except for the fact the man had spent 41 years in prison. I believe his original sentence was 50 years or life or some version of that, but it was life basically. And here he's appearing before parole in his mid 70s. Now, his backstory is significant. So yeah, I'm not determining whether he deserved parole or not. So this is not really where I'm going with this, but um, based on the parole board's own account of who he was, the warden of account of who he was, I'll generally describe the way they characterize this man. So mid 70s, he's a Vietnam veteran. He was a decorated Vietnam veteran in that he didn't just get, a prize for signing up, or was a creative chef and got the world's greatest Hanoi hamburger or whatever. The man was received valor awards for jumping into combat zones while some of the qualifiers for those awards were being shot at. Some of the ways that he extended himself in theater. I guess he was deployed 8 years. So, Vietnam was not a drop in the bucket for him. He'd spent some time there, and the entire time was decorated while he was there. So in that era, I was not, certainly don't know combat. I don't. And I don't know whether Vietnam was actually harder on soldiers than other war theater. Like, it's arguable. I read a book called House to House by a sergeant that's out of Buffalo, New York. And a great book, by the way, if you get a chance to read it, excellent book. But that describes kind of what was going on when they were in Fallujah the first time, and all the houses were wired as IEDs, and just there was a lot of stuff there. So it's hard for me to say whether Vietnam in the jungle was worse than or equal to than what's going on in Fallujah. What I can say is that wartime is horrible, and based on how the media received soldiers coming back from Vietnam, they were almost the enemy just because they went, which is somewhat difficult for me to understand, having not been there. That way, I have uncles that served in Vietnam, and I know that for the most part, they lived productive lives. However, they did have some damage. So I guess my perspective on it from my naive standpoint is that if I'm a soldier and I'm literally walking through a jungle that has branches and everything else brushing up against me, and I don't know my enemy is watching me, and I know for sure they know where I am and they know the jungle better than me, and all I have is unsophisticated weapons and an unsophisticated time for weaponry, I'm probably not feeling too good about doing that every single day for an entire tour, nonetheless doing it for almost a decade. And so this gentleman did that and did it with honor. And but coming back, he had a substance use problem, which is common. He was addicted to drugs and alcohol. He came back. He was working, had about 7-month job here, 7-month job there, is based on this whole thing. And if you watch the original video, I'll put the original video in the link so you can hear his backstory. Nonetheless, some event happened. He committed a murder while he was back. Now, in that time, I'm not defending his position. What I'm saying is it's reasonable to believe that he had some problems, killing people and being afraid for his own life and seeing friends die for almost a decade in Vietnam. It's entirely possible, well, almost a decade in the service. It's entirely possible that, he had mental health damage, what I think is true. And then you had substance use disorder on top of it. And the treatment that was available to returning vets at the time as well as the social construct that would put somebody like him as a substandard human being. And on top of it, he's a black man. You know, who knows what he faced, but it all led to one incident that turned into a homicide or a murder. And he lost his life because of it. So he was then sentenced to a Louisiana state prison for life. Well, he now faces the parole board, and he's in front of the parole board, and they're noting his service. And in fact, two of the parole board members at this point for this particular event, there was 5 parole board members, and they were thanking him for his service because he did it with valor. And not only that, you know, here he is spending 41 years so far of his life sentence. So far, 41 years. He's in his mid 70s or early 70s. And he got 3 write-ups in the entire time in 41 years. I would say he wasn't really known to be, you know, a discipline problem. He had been a trustee has been a trustee for a couple decades, which for those that don't know, when you're in those types of roles, you've got a job. You got several jobs. There's certain jobs you do, and if you keep, you know, above board and that stuff, you get to keep your jobs. It's not that you're a trusted inmate. It just means you're trusted more than others, and you can do work while you're there. I happen to be a trustee in county jails, which, you know, my charges were nowhere near what some of these guys do. I mean, I was just a struggling alcoholic making some bad decisions that could have cost people lives. But at the end, you know, I was given opportunities that at least let me work. I can tell you it makes your time go by a lot quicker. But you're talking 41 years. He's doing decades worth of work in there. And so it speaks to his, you know, his work ethic and his ability to comply with authority at that point. So now all these years later, he's now available before parole board. Oh, and on top of it, he'd become a chaplain for, you know, about 15 years doing rehabilitation work for people that were also struggling, and volunteer work specific to veterans, which, you know, so aside from the murder, you know, you would normally say this person has lived a life that has had some struggles, but for the most part has been somebody that you could say, okay, was it, you know, somebody you'd really want to come alongside and help. So all that is the backstory, and you're sitting here seeing this man who speaks humbly, and as far as I can tell, has done what he's supposed to do. Because my only perspective is one video based on what the parole board is saying about his behavior, and then the own thing, and then lo and behold comes in a DA, the DA that's involved in this whole thing, and I'll let the DA show you what his feelings are on all this. And in fact, I'm not even sure how I want to approach this, but you know what I'll do? I'll share with you what he has to say. I'll try to speed it up to the relevant parts, and then I'll make my point. And hopefully you guys can see where I'm coming from on this. So let me just share this real quick for you and play the video. And so the DA is about to speak his position on, or his opinion on paroling this individual.
Tracking those folks down. Mr. Clark, we hear from DA's perspective.
So this is Bryant Clark. He's he is the DA involved in this whole thing. And first of all, my first observation is if you look at his face, and through this video, it's a pretty lengthy video. So at this point, we're about 27 minutes into the video of a 47-minute video. And if you look it up for yourself, look at the rate of substance use disorder within attorneys. It's one of the highest rates of substance use disorder in any profession. That's one thing. The second thing is, so don't come at it from a lofty perspective. Now, I'm not crapping on all attorneys. I'm definitely not. However, don't throw stones in glass houses, they say. I find it interesting how arrogant many of them are, and how the life of other people holds in the balance. And I'm not saying innocent people are coming to them getting judged. My point is their position is they almost position themselves many times. Not all. Several DAs that I've been associated with position themselves as better than other people. And when in fact they have their own demons, to the point that there is one of the highest, not DAs, but attorneys in general have one of the highest rates of substance use disorder of any profession. So this gentleman right here, if you look at his eyes and you know anything about it.
Just briefly, some comments on this case.
So here's his comments.
It appears to be kind of a...
One more point. Everything up to this point has shown a person 3 citations in 40 years while incarcerated. I think they counted 5 or 6 medals of merit, at least in the military service in Vietnam. So, and I think 2 of them were valor. So that's what's being positioned, this man, and he's done his time well.
Somewhat of a new wrinkle in this case, listening to Mr. Miles speaking. Apparently now there's become some type of newfound self-defense claim in here. My understanding is that now the claim is Mr. Stiles had swung a hammer at Mr. Miles in this case, which then precipitated in him murdering Mr. Stiles, which is, from my recollection, contained nowhere within the police report. In fact, the statements of the witnesses are to the contrary, that Mr. Miles was the individual.
First of all, I want to just reach through the stinking monitor because of his tone. I'm glad it paused right there. It's kind of funny. I didn't mean to make it pause in such a dumb face for him, but I'm glad I did. Nice duck lips. I'm getting irritated with him because the thing is like, I'm talking about a crime 41 years ago. He made a statement about the guy swinging a hammer. Maybe after all this time, after all that substance use disorder, all the times he's used drugs in a military combat setting that was one of the scariest by all accounts. Anybody that tests what Vietnam was, it's a terrifying experience. Again, I don't know if it's more terrifying another war or whatever, but still, every minute of every day, you don't know if you're going to fall in a hole and get speared to death, friend gets speared to death, or get blown up, or hit by Agent Orange from your own people. I mean, who knows? And so yeah, your mind might be a little messed up, and you might forget some of the details about yet another traumatic event where you actually killed one of many people that you've killed in your life. Let's just get real. He was a young kid at the time. He's now in his mid-70s. I'm not trying to defend what he actually did, but this attitude, when the man has done every single thing else by the book, by what they can account for to determine his freedom, he wants to stick it to a man in his 70s.
Individual who approached Mr. Stiles, swung at Mr. Stiles.
He's basically saying you're lying and you're retelling the whole story, because he's saying that he had a hammer swung at him, and now he's suggesting that every single thing else about him is not credible.
First, and then basically unloaded his handgun, murdering Mr. Stiles in this case. Nonchalantly left the scene, and matter of fact told another employee who was arriving that he had just murdered him, and when the other employee did not believe him, that he told him to go look and see, basically.
So he didn't even run. He killed the guy and said, I just killed this man. It wasn't even like he even drew this whole thing out. There's obviously something wasn't okay with him in this situation to do it and then casually say it. He's clearly seen some stuff in his life. Now, the thing before all this I want to tell you is that there's already been victim impact statements here, and they're all advocating for his release and stating forgiveness and demonstrating, saying that he has been rehabilitated based on his beliefs and how he's behaved himself. The victims' families, all these years later, have advocated, all of them advocated for his release. And here's where the DA is coming in with this stuff.
Once again, a very nonchalant statement. So I'm not sure how much responsibility has really been taken for this, given that
his responsibility hasn't been taken after 41 years of doing every single thing else he should be doing, including getting clean.
Now have this introduction of what I would characterize as a so-called self-defense argument to some extent. Obviously, this is a murder case. This is a life sentence case. While it is recognized that Mr. Miles has served 41 years, I think the state's question would be, what is the value of a life? Or more specific, what is the value of Mr. Stiles' life? Is his life worth simply 41 years and community service? I would think not. I would think.
So that sounds noble. And I think that it's a valid point. The life of another individual, what is it worth, and how much should somebody else pay for it? And that's true. But hold that thought.
That's why the state of Louisiana has the penalties that it has for the offense of murder, not simply 41 years.
I'm not opposed to anything he's saying relative to what the defendant or what the parolee, the inmate deserves right now. I'm not saying that he didn't deserve what he did. I'm not saying he didn't live a high-risk life and have to deal with all those things with it. He's where he's at because of choices he made and the things he made. My issue is that everybody around there is saying, and from a system perspective, saying we believe this guy is somebody you should take special consideration for. And here this person is saying, he's miscounting exactly how the whole fight started. Let's keep in mind, he's alleging this man is uncredible because of an event that happened over 40 years ago. What he is saying is not characterizing correctly how it started.
Years in community service. It's unfortunate that it took the murder of Mr. Stiles in this case for Mr. Miles to, quote unquote, turn the corner. unfortunately, Mr. Miles has shown not only in public, but also.
So that quote unquote turn the corner, the reason he used that quote is that was quoted by the warden of the Louisiana State Penitentiary. So the warden said he's turned the corner. So he's using the warden's own quote to try to get this guy in trouble or to put disparaging comments about his actual rehabilitation.
As far as write-ups while incarcerated, that there is some opposition to authority. The fact.
So look at the guy's face on the left of your screen. If you're looking at the screen the same way I am, he's in the bottom left. Look at how his eyebrows went up. He's the DA is saying that based on this guy's write-ups in prison, he has an opposition to authority. He's been written up 3 times in 41 years, and none of them were violent offenses or anything.
That Mr. Stiles may have
smile on his face.
used not so appropriate language towards Mr. Miles certainly did not warrant him in losing his life and having his family lose their family member in this case.
So he's also suggesting that language doesn't matter. I'm not supporting the notion that we should be so sensitive over language to kill people. But isn't that the whole woke thing? What we say hurts people's feelings. Well, you take a Vietnam vet who's just out of theater, spent almost a decade of his career in the military, decorated for his serving this country and obviously killing people for the country, comes back, in a civilian capacity, is not going to be healed immediately with a substance use disorder, gets into an altercation and it turns to death. Let's say the guy didn't have a hammer and he just thought he saw one. It's entirely possible with what goes on to the human mind in that kind of a traumatic situation. Go to any rehab in your town and talk to somebody. They may not exactly have all the facts straight on circumstances that led them to bad places. That one detail has already been tried. He's already been convicted. He's already served. And now this guy is now going back and saying that he's rejecting authority. And I'll shut up. But you can clearly see this person that's part of the person on the bottom left, your left and my left right now as I'm looking at the monitor. He is somebody that does reintroduction to society program. So he actually has a housing program and gets jobs, and they only advocate for those people they think of high possibility of success. And he's saying praises for this gentleman. Couldn't wait for him to get involved because he felt like he could help others. And here the DA is making these astonishing statements, and I'm not done with him yet. I'm going to make a statement about that when it's over.
And with that, the state would oppose a granting of clemency in this case.
So thank you so much for the DA.
So that's the DA's perspective. He should not get clemency because he miscounted whether a hammer was used to start the fight. So how the fight was started. Now he's saying that he's alleging self-defense. He's not alleging self-defense. They asked him how he remembered how it happened, and that's how he remembered how it happened. He didn't one time say it was self-defense. He just remembered how the fight happened, and there was some things were said to him that fired him up. The most important focus for him was the reason he got started was because of what was said to him. Again, a very damaged mind that just went through historically one of the most significant wartime events that has damaged more veterans than, it's cliche with a veteran's mental health and substance use disorder. The VA right down the street here, that's in my town, one of the biggest hospitals, obviously one of the biggest VAs in the area, just went through a big revitalization program. You go over there, you're going to see a lot of Vietnam vets, and they're all going to have similar stories about trauma and situations like that. They're probably not going to account for every significant circumstance in their life. And honestly, it's shameful, this behavior. But so he's made a statement minimizing his military service, saying he rejected authority because of 3 citations in 41 years. Now, I'd like you to hear the parole board statements.
Participation. Mr. Miles, is there a statement you'd like to make?
I know I can't change anything.
Mr. Miles is the one, is obviously the person that's trying to get parole. He says, I know I wouldn't change anything. I wish I could.
Y'all would look pretty with my record. And we're going to be a clemency. Thank you for your time.
Yes, sir. Ms. Cole?
The other thing, notice is the DA the entire time is watching himself and turning his head back and forth, checking his angles to see how he looks in Zoom. Give me a break.
Thank you. Mr. Miles came to prison and did what he needed to do.
Okay, so let's skip forward this. It's all
participated in many Vietnam, and that's because of the
Sorry.
And he's Graham and he's we're going to help him see that they've shown in.
But in your case, we do need to thank you.
So
Thank you.
This is where the parole board speaks, and they actually speak about the DA's behavior, and I applaud them for even saying this.
Hey, is the board prepared to vote? Ms. Jackson?
Mr. Miles, you hear a lot of people say thank you for your service, and it's become a cliche. We say that to
Watch the
people
DA.
who never really left, went in combat or did anything, but we say it. But in your case, we do need to thank you for your service. A 19-year-old kid dropped in the middle of a hellhole and served honorably and valiantly is not someone who's resistant to authority. I take exception to the DA's characterization of who you are.
So she says that's not consistent with somebody that is not receptive to authority. I take exception to the DA's characterization of what went on, and he's already rocking the chair and starting to show his body language is irritated. Now, I'm not going to go through everything he does, but you're going to want to see him more animated. Generally, the parole board all feels the same way. They all recognize his honorable service and that he's not rejecting authority. But what's interesting to me is the behavior. First of all, the God complex to behave this way in a parole board meeting while not on camera is shocking to me, even for what I already have a little bit of a bias towards this in certain figures in the legal system. But check out his behavior. I'm gonna fast forward to some of it.
He's too young to have gone to Vietnam, so he
he
has
tells him
no
he's too young.
idea what people experience.
I thought that was funny. She says the DA is too young to have known about Vietnam, and he has no idea what people experienced.
Brother who went to Vietnam, thank God he came back, but he came back with a drinking problem. And thank God he has overcome that drinking problem. And you cannot underestimate the impact of that trauma on people's lives.
There it is. You can't underestimate the trauma in people's lives. Guy spent 41 years. He's paid a huge price for the impact of that trauma in his life and the choice he made in killing somebody. He paid a price for it, for sure.
And so I do thank you that you serve with such valor and with such honor. You have done exceptionally well as an inmate to only have had 3 write-ups in almost 41
3 write-ups in 41 years.
years shows that you are not a person who is defiant. You are a person who does what you are required to do, just as you did in Vietnam. You said you didn't expect any special recognition for it, you just did your job. And that's what you've done since you've been in prison.
Now watch the
And
DA's
you've
behavior.
done that honorably and admirably as well.
Now he starts running.
So my vote today would be to recommend to the
How
governor
angry he is.
a commutation of sentence to 50 years with immediate parole eligibility because of your outstanding prison record, the positive remark from the warden, and the outstanding service you provided not only to the prison.
So what I find interesting is they're giving him a hard time. This DA, so much hypocrisy here. First of all, he's going after this guy about not respecting authority. This DA gets challenged, his authority gets challenged, and the first thing he does is misbehave in his demeanor in a court setting. So he already starts to lose it after he's just condemned this man, saying his behavior should be there. The other thing is that based on his feelings getting hurt about him misbehaving and somebody else calling him out on the whole thing, so that I guess the guy's remainder of his days should stay intact because this person feels like his opinion got hurt. His pride is ridiculous here, and it's what a lot of us get really cynical about when we're supposed to trust the system. When you got somebody like this, it's really more about his arrogance and his opinion than anything else, and you can see it just elevates from here. So who has the self-control problem? This person has not served in Vietnam. He has not known the situations that this person on parole has. And here he is behaving this way. So what's his excuse?
Prison, but to your fellow inmates,
It's worse.
not to mention the service you provided to your country. That's my vote.
Thank you, Mrs. Jackson. Mr. Butcher?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Miles, I'd like to echo the
Cranked up.
words of
I'll bet you anything he's like
Mrs. Jackson. I
right now
too
behind the scenes of what he's
am a child of the Vietnam War era. I was ordered to go to be inducted as I finished college. But for medical reasons,
So this DA walked into it. He's got one person who has a brother came back from Vietnam, all screwed up and overcame a substance use disorder. He's got another person that served in Vietnam on there, and he's looking like a complete idiot because he minimized this guy because of the account of how it happened.
I was rejected. And I understand what a hellhole Vietnam was by American soldiers. And again, I'd like to thank you for your service.
See, he's laughing after he said,
Based
guy
on
says, what a hellhole. And the guy, obviously there's a delay here. He laughs after that.
the victim's family being unopposed, an excellent disciplinary
The victim's family is unopposed. Please catch that. And they've already written emails. They've already read the emails in the court session. They're unopposed.
only 2 or 3 write-ups in 41 years of incarceration, good programs, the length of incarceration, your age, and positive remarks from Warden Falgood. My recommendation is to commute your sentence to 50 years with parole eligibility after serving 40 years.
So he's eligible now.
Mr. O'Shea. Mr. Marabella?
Mr. Miles, I concur with everything both of my colleagues have indicated. My vote likewise would be to commute your sentence, to recommend a commutation of sentence to 50 years with immediate parole.
Mr. Freeman?
I totally agree with everything that's been said, and my vote also is to future sentence
See his face and how he's
50
listening.
years with immediate parole eligibility.
And I concur with my colleagues, Mr.
Watch
Miles.
the
My
DA
vote
the
is the
entire time.
same, so it's unanimous. We'll make a recommendation to the governor that your sentence be commuted to 50 years and that you be immediately paroled. Goodbye.
I'm curious why the DA had to wipe his nose at the end. It's almost like that's a habit. DA, why are your eyes puffy like that? Why are you wiping your nose like that? That's odd. Yeah, probably just a runny nose. I don't know. But if you notice, the parole board wasn't going to deal with it. They politely put him in his place. Now they're going to click off here real quick, and this DA is so upset he's going to stay on.
Thank you all.
Nope.
Right.
Great potatoes, Mrs. Green.
We'll skip
So
this.
Amanda tells us your
Okay.
family has cable.
And so he stays on.
Madam Chair,
Obviously, still
Yes, sir.
Madam Chair,
now he's got to defend
may I
himself.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to address a comment that was made regarding, I suppose, the state's characterization of Mr. Miles's military service. I would like to point out to the board that my family, my entire family, has served in the military. No one was disparaging Mr. Miles's military service in this matter. The state takes a great deal of
I love how it's the state that takes that whatever he's going to say offense is what the word he was trying to get to. The state does. No, you do. You take offense to it. I'm going to end the video here on this because you guys can watch the rest if you want. It's really nothing more except him whining, and they just say thank you, bye bye. But basically, so he's literally gets back on there, calls them back in after session to defend himself, and every time refers to it as the state taking offense for it. Many of us have family that served in the military. I don't have family that served in Vietnam. It was a different animal based on all accounts. Again, I don't know if it's different than Afghanistan or anywhere else where people have served. I know some people that have been in Afghanistan that have had some hell experiences. And so war is war and it's awful. I've never been there and thank God I haven't. But, I think what's fair to say, we all know Vietnam was a hellhole. Half the parole board just said the same thing. This man served honorably there. I'm not saying he's a good man. I don't know anything about him, and it's not about him. It's about how they were characterizing him. The legal system characterized him in a way that said he should be free. He's impacted other people's lives. He should be free. The real point take home in this video is this DA, Bryant Clark, get over yourself. The DAs that we have and that behave this way across this country, check yourself at the door. First of all, I wonder what would happen on your substance use evaluation if somebody went in there right now and took a urine screen from you. How much alcohol have you had in the last 24 hours? How much cocaine has gone in your system? I don't know. I'm just guessing. Statistically, nationally, you might be one of them. I can tell you that you got personally offended because you personally made a statement about something that made no sense whatsoever and you lost. Be gracious about it, walk away. But no, you were offended because you didn't want anybody to believe that you disparaged the military. Why? Because you probably ran on that when you got elected into that position. And here you are discrediting a Vietnam veteran that had nothing but honor on his service there based on all documented accounts. I'm sure in the actuality of his service, there are some pretty ugly things happen because that's what a lot of guys did to survive. So how does somebody like that spends day after day after day in that setting just come back into the normal population, have a regular disagreement when somebody starts a fight with him and react appropriately? You can't expect it. You can't expect it. And he's served time for it and is now in a place where I think that the important part is he's in a program that's going to reintroduce him to society that will ease him into it rather than just say, here's a cocktail of drugs for your mental health and on you go. Guys, I hope this was useful to you. Man, no matter what position you're in, don't be arrogant about your role, especially if you're impacting other people's lives. Deal with facts and information that's based on the actual situation going on and not just your opinion based on what your ego needs to feed it. I don't know if the man's an innocent man. What I do know is this DA is behaving in the way I've seen stuff like this happen before. Bryant Clark, you should be ashamed of yourself, and you honestly should never be in that role. You're one hair away from in a regular situation in your life. You're probably on the other side of the fence by the way I saw that personality. You'd make mistakes, but you've got the power of the law behind you in the situation. And now you're impacting even more people's lives with the attitude. Humble yourself before the process, do what you were signed up to do, and be a little bit more fair about it. Your arrogance, nobody gives a crap about. Guys, between now and the next time we talk, please stay out of trouble.